Yes, sir.
Hi, it's Greg Blonder from Brookline. I'm also the executive director of WeAmend.us, which is working on a new Bill of Rights through the constitutional
Up a
system.
bit, please.
Oh.
Say again, Costas?
Just speak up a bit. It's hard
Oh,
to hear. I
Can-
can't hear him.
Can you hear okay? There's a funny echo coming from that thing. Yeah, I was just wondering whether you've had some time to think about, and if not, would like to set up yet another working group on thinking through what the decision-making process will look like. If the goal of this committee is to produce an ideologically pure amendment, that's an easy thing to do. The chance of that amendment passing through Congress or through the states is near zero. The actual amendment is going to have to be different than any of the ones that I've seen. It's going to be extremely nuanced, as Nico mentioned and Jeff has mentioned, and I think Scott as well. And that's not amenable to the kind of discussion that you can have in an open session like this. When you look at the history of how decision-making occurs, both in corporate environments as well as public environments, it usually uses this, what they call an hourglass process, where you have to go back into committee. Some of the decision-making has to be done in private, but then exposed publicly. I would recommend you look at what happened in Iceland with the Iceland Constitution. I can send you a technical paper on that where someone did a study on it. But basically what they did is they had a large group like this. They gathered facts. The actual writing was done with a small group of people, but every day on Facebook they said, here's our draft. They would get the public and other committee members would weigh in on that draft. Sometimes it was just a word change. They would then take that feedback. But it's hard to do writing and deliberation on something this nuanced, this complicated, with as many unintended consequences as possible. And in particular, once you get your committee going on the tactics, you'll find the tactics it takes to get this passed will require the amendment to be written in such a way that it can be approved. You're going to need to worry about compromise and so on. And so I just think that you need early on, and this gets into even the scheduling, early on some discussion amongst the committee members on how you see the decision-making process happening. Because I can guarantee you 12 commission members in a room like this for 2 hours is not going to get you across the finish line with a quality product. And I can provide some suggestions. I've worked on this through my whole career, but I think we're headed in a direction that unless we change the decision-making process, the output of the committee will be interesting to the public and will not actually result in change. And after all, the goal here is not to feel good about being involved in this process. The goal is to change the way the United States functions.
Well,
That's a very different.
I think we would
subject.
welcome your suggestions. Do you want to send them to us?
I'd be glad to, or I really do think you need some work. This is another question, just a related question, which I think Scott brought up, is how do you see the working groups working with the general public? Because while you might not want to have decisions made there, you might want to have a robust discussion with people. I think it's good to send in written material. I'm glad to do it. It's not as effective in a subject like this as sitting down and actually having a dialogue. The dialogue is more valuable in this case. Not that the written material isn't important too, but so I don't know how you expect these groups to work. Like I, for example, would be very interested in working with the Committee on Tactics. That's what I've done strategic planning my whole career. You can't write that down on a piece of paper and encapsulate a career's worth of understanding.
That's the working group that we haven't launched yet.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying that's true of all these things.
Right.
All the working groups have the same issue, that there are people who might come to the meeting with a lifetime of experience that they can't give you in a white paper. And so I don't know how that works. I understand you don't want it to be a decision, but I do think you want to have a vigorous debate. And so I don't understand how that works.
Do you have any questions, comments from other members of the commission?
I think it's a tremendous point. I think this has not been, it has not been an ignored topic. This actually is one of the, I think one of the first two meetings this topic came up. And obviously we've been in data collection mode, but I think it's important to bring it back up. But I hear three things, and tell me if I'm hearing them differently. I hear three things that are related but discrete. I think I hear one, advice to us that as you are drafting and thinking, and really drafting, right? Like this is the in the weeds choices, decisions, writing, evaluation, that's a process that needs to be public, but also needs to be people with sleeves rolled up in a room. And we need to figure out the mechanism through which that happens.
No bill in Congress is written on the floor of Congress.
Correct, right?
So-
They're all written behind closed doors, right? Go to the Hamilton musical. But then
That may be extreme, but I'm just saying that.
there's a balance, right? Between, and it's not about hiding anything. It's about the work that it takes to compromise, to
Correct.
think about the choices in an honest and open way without fear of saying something that somebody's going to come back and hammer you on for no good reason.
Yeah.
I think I hear that as number one, like advice to us to think about what that process is in a thoughtful way. Number two, I think is one that we have spoken about, but I don't think we've digested. I think is very important. It's how do we do this differently? I mean, I said this at the beginning. How do we do this so it's not just an ideologically pure thing that's going to get rejected by 50% of America for no reason other than it's seen as something that is ideologically pure on one side or the other, or no side, but just
Correct.
is perceived that way.
Just because it came from Massachusetts.
Just because it came from Massachusetts. And I think that there's an opportunity, I personally do, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I think there's an opportunity to do something different. And just on a personal level, I'm inspired by what's going on as a registered independent, by what's going on with criminal justice reform, right? That is two sides of, historically in the last 15 years of American politics, two extreme sides of the political conversation coming together to do something. Not perfect, but it's something that happened. So how do we I think I hear the second one, how do you take that approach? And third, how do we bring members of the public with really true, deep expertise that we don't necessarily have around the table into a process, whether it's in the domains that you're talking about or others,
All of them. It's not
and
just-
incorporate that into A and B, 1 and 2. But
Thank you. Do we have other comments?
is
from-
that fair? Is that,
More eloquent than I said it, thank you. Yes.
okay. I just want to make sure.
Can I just ask if, when you were talking about the decision-making process, are you talking the bigger process of amending the Constitution as making that decision, or the decision-making process and what we're going to come up with as a?
What we're going to come up with, what you're going to come up with as a committee on behalf
And I
of
think
the,
you're going to send us your recommendations, right?
I will do that, but
Yeah.
as I said, it just can only capture a small fraction of the knowledge.
Yeah, and we
Yeah,
can
and
talk
that-
some more, you know.
I would add that working groups, as far as I anticipate, will be doing interviews as well, not just reading documents. So the interview process is also important, factual gathering.
Okay,
so.
thank you.
And I'll weigh in here too, when I read the ballot question and thought about this, said to myself, is this going to be, tilting at windmills, or is this actually going to be actionable? And I really hope it's the latter.
Yeah.
Any other comments?